Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ben Hedges. I'm the CEO of Links America, and we're a subsidiary company of the London Internet Exchange, Links in London. It's been great to hear so much from Telegeography about what's going on in London. We see that as well in terms of the transit prices. One of the reasons why I'm here today actually is because the new submarine cable coming from Brazil up to Virginia Beach lands into what we're doing in the US. We run an exchange in the Ashburn area, demand that came from that. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. I'm here to talk to you about deploying a disaggregated model for Links's London 2 network, which sounds really technical, but I'm not that technical, so this is not going to be a technical presentation. The good news is there's an EVPN presentation coming up afterwards, thank you, that you'll learn a little bit more about EVPN. It's been 6 years since Links were at a NIC.br, PTT.br meeting. So those of you that are regular attendees will remember back in 2012, John Souter came along and talked about our experiences of our deployment and handling the London 2012 Olympics. It's as you were starting to gear up for Rio in 2016. At that time, we'd done a big migration of our primary LAN, our London 1 LAN in London, to Juniper. We were the first to deploy PTXs out into the network, and we were the first to put 100 gig ports on those PTX networks. But 6 years is a long time. And we run more than one peering LAN, and what we've been doing in the last 3 years, really, is developing what we feel is the next generation peering LAN for us. There's all sorts of pressures around what we go through, and I'll come through those as we go through the presentation a little. So I think I got these buttons right, but we'll find out. So some of this is marketing slides, I'm afraid. So this is a marketing slide. Hey, we're big, but you probably know about us. There's another marketing slide here that we run IXPs. One of the unique points about Links is we're a mutual membership organization. We're a non-profit, so we don't have any shareholders. We exist purely for the interests of our members, and we operate peering exchanges, peering LANs for them. But we also operate in the regulatory space. So we operate a little bit like a trade association. So our members that aren't big enough to have their own regulatory teams, we go in and represent as the industry if there are things that we have issues with or want to understand better in Westminster, the UK Parliament, in Brussels with the EU. And then we work closely with organizations like ISOC and the Infraestructure Internet Coalition in the US when we're talking with the FCC. And it really, really helps bring that membership feel back together. But we're here to talk about peering, really. Our members are like you find at any other peering network. They're access networks, they're ISPs, they're OTTs, but there's a huge range. We've got a lot of them. In fact, 825 now. When John came in 2012, we had just over 400. So 6 years, we've nearly doubled in size in terms of members. And I want you to just remember that for a second because we're going to come back to that. And we also have changed the traffic. So in 2012, we hit a big milestone for us, which was we went through a terabit of traffic. Now we're 4 times that. So our membership has doubled, 100% growth in membership. The traffic has increased 4 times. In that time, we've had to increase staff to deal with it as well. Links is still a relatively small organization. We've got 60 staff, but we've gone up from 35. But the trouble is, in the world of being an internet exchange operator, the costs are always being driven down by the members and need cheaper costs. In that same time period, I remember our traffic has gone up 400%, our membership has doubled, our staff costs have gone up, our revenues have only risen by around 30%. Now that's largely because we give prices back to members every single year. But of course that is not scalable. We can't continue to do that. So one of the things that we needed to find from this new technology, this new solution, was a way to properly bring in automation to be able to deliver better, more improved services, a better range of products, but also at a cost that we could also keep driving down and keep driving that scale for our members. So as well as in London, we've got LANs in Manchester, England, in Cardiff in Wales, and in Edinburgh in Scotland. Now these are run as remote exchanges, so they're not connected back to London, but they are significantly smaller. Manchester is the biggest of those three. They've got 100 ASN, so it's a good-sized regional peering LAN, but they don't really impact what we do in terms of what we have to achieve in London. And then we also run this exchange in Northern Virginia that I'm responsible for. We launched that in 2014. And it's now got about 20% market share in terms of the ASs that you can get in the region. And people wanted to come and see some diversity there. There was only one place you could peer previously. Now there's two, and our members tend to like that. In London, the dual LANs really are completely dual, and they're completely separate. So they are in the same topology, so they're based in the same data centers around London, so we're in 16 locations. And the span for that is a 65-kilometer span. So it's a big network. It's a complex network. And the London 2 LAN now is around the same size as the London 1 LAN was in 2012. So it's a big LAN to have to work with. In fact, as it says there, it's bigger than a lot of main European IXPs. So it's not just an afterthought. But it does give us huge benefits. By having the two LANs, it enables us to actually experiment a bit more. So internally, for a whilst this project was going on, we called the London 2 LAN the Innovation LAN, because it's where we were going to be able to trial and test new products, new ideas, new technologies that we could then roll out to the membership and into the community. So we started with a review, because that's what you always do. At the time, we'd already grown to about 700 members. There were about 300 on the London 2 LAN then. And we looked at what we needed to achieve. A lot of what we needed to achieve was triggered by the 100 gig orders that were starting to come through. Suddenly, we needed something that was going to be able to scale properly with the 100 gig order demand. But there was another problem as well, a technical problem that we needed to solve, which is as the number of members with 100 gig capacity orders increased, the stress and weight on those members with gig ports increased as well. When there were big traffic attacks or big attacks, the smaller members found their ports getting completely swamped. And so often they were having to disconnect and then set up their sessions afterwards going in. So we needed to find a way to scale for the large capacity members to be able to bring costs down for the large capacity members, but also make sure that the smaller capacity members were able to keep their peering sessions up and connected. So the process that we went through took us going through a series of vendor testing. We put an RFP out and we had 6 vendors respond to that. Some, as we have traditionally used, is a single vendor with a single software solution, and others, including the solution we ultimately went with, was a disaggregated solution. So we saw that we found that we could find a solution that actually could scale and do what we wanted to do, but it would mean us moving away from our traditional single vendor and software solution. So, representing a network as big as we had and as many members as we had, that was kind of scary stuff. But we knew we had to do it because of those reasons that I mentioned earlier. What we also knew is because our budgets are run annually and we know the amount of CapEx that has to go into developing and migrating a new LAN, is that even before we'd done the deployment, that we would going to be able to pass significant savings onto the members. So in July 2016, we reduced our port fees on London 2 by 40%. Now this is in context with the regular annual port reduction fees that we do. So every year in November, we present a budget to our membership and they sign it off, and that includes prices for the following January and onwards. And for the last 15 years, that's always included a reduction in port fees of one form or another. So this July 2016 port fee reduction was in addition to one in January 2016 and one that followed in January 2017. So we were that confident in the savings we were going to be able to make from it. And as a non-profit and a mutual, we immediately pass those on to the members when we're able to. So the new solution needed to be 100 gig ready. It needed to be able to be fully automated. As I said, we can't really scale anymore the way that we're scaling. We need to be able to have more automation. And it would bring EVPN that would solve some of those problems that the smaller members would have about being able to isolate the traffic and isolate their ports. And it would mean a change in our topology. So moving from a core and edge topology that we have that we had previously to leaf and spine. All of these combined means that we'll be the first IXP in the world to adopt these technology concepts together and put them out into a single network. So again, very nervous that we're going to try and do something quite significant, quite substantial as a change on a very big peering LAN. So we took our time over it. In fact, we actually took about 2.5 years from beginning to end to finish that. So who did we use? Who did we choose? Well, we worked with a hardware vendor called EdgeCore and a software vendor called IP Infusion. EdgeCore, essentially a white box manufacturer. Their traditional base is in the data center market, but they've started to move into the service provider market a lot more, and that kind of fits nicely with where we were and what we were doing. And IP Infusion are coming up for being 20 years old, and they were started as a commercial-grade, hardware-independent network software solution for IPv4 initially, and then later IPv6. But what it's enabled is us to bring in this change, and it's enabled us to know that as we go to future planning, we've got a lot more control and a lot more choice. So network engineers love big shiny boxes, right? And when something starts to run a bit slower, let's buy something new and faster and shinier. But when you're trying to run an organization where you're driving prices down all the time for your customers, that just doesn't work. So we needed to find a way, and this leaf and spine way allows us to putting much more simple fixed configuration switches to expand the demand when the capacity demand comes up, rather than having to buy lots of new shiny boxes every time the new shiny box comes out. So we're a simple layer 2 provider, so it doesn't need to be complex. And the more new boxes that come out, they have huge feature sets, and we don't use those feature sets. We use a fraction of what's on the feature sets. So let's go with something that's quite simple and not very complex, and actually it means that there's going to be less errors and it's going to be less prone to failure. And we know from regularly asking our members, we have regular membership surveys, that their number one most important thing is service availability. Whole range of things, customer service, speed of response, value. So even though cost is a big driver, the number one in priority for our members is service availability, and that's where we try to focus that losing sight of the other things. Now this slide isn't very good here. Hopefully the picture's a bit better there. This is a technical slide, so I'm not going to spend very long on it. But as you can see, it's very straightforward. We had to be able to, still in the switches, be able to deliver services to the low capacity 1 gig members coming in, but also still be able to take their 100 gig ports as well, and a bunch of 10s. The makeup of our capacity at the moment now is around 55% of our capacity is from 100 gig ports. The rest is from 10s with a tiny slither from 1 gig ports. But the gig ports account for well over 100 members. So we have a lot of smaller members, and we're a mutual organization, so they are just as important, and we want to look after them just the same way. The one bit of technical information I can give you, but don't ask me to explain it, is that the chipset is the Broadcom Tomahawk chipset, which apparently means something to people that understand it, but not a lot to me. And this translates straight over into essentially the switch design, which again, looks a bit better on there than it does on the screen that's in front of me here. So disaggregation, it's kind of a buzzword. It really just means we're separating out the hardware and software vendors. So it means that we go and get a generic switch, a white box switch from one source, and then we can go and independently select the software from another. It's been going on for quite a long time in the server space. It allows the organizations, the vendors, to focus on the things that they are best at, and so you tend to try and get best in class in terms of each of the different disciplines. And from our point of view, it means that we're able to select and change suppliers as depend on our needs. So if something changes, or there's a new technology or new product that we want to bring out, we don't necessarily have to wait for a single vendor roadmap to get there. Or have to change the whole thing out just to change to a vendor that is going to get to that point on the roadmap sooner. This way, it may be a software development, and if the software vendor that we're not using roadmap doesn't get there fast enough, we can just change the software vendor. The switch doesn't have to change. Same on the switches. If the switches don't have the density or the capacity that we need going forward, say 400 gig, terabit, whatever it is that the roadmap is to, then we don't necessarily have to change the software vendor either. So it gives us a lot more choice, it gives us a lot more control, and ultimately it means we can deliver a lot more value and benefit back to our members. So that flexibility is really key for us, but the flexibility isn't just for us. The flexibility is also to members, because members can then see, and they're managing their traffic with the EVPN technology coming in. And I say I'm not going to try and do the technical side of EVPN, but that increased flexibility the members get from a technical point of view with EVPN adds additional value to them, as well as the cost saving that we're trying to deliver through, and as well as the confidence we're going to be able to grow at scale for a long time. So it means we can play the long game. We can sit in, plan in. Previously, we maybe would run on a 4 to 5 year roadmap for vendor and vendor technology. By taking this disaggregated approach, it means it's always a fluid thing. So we're a lot more fluid, but we can play longer as well. So I'm going to just take you through briefly the process here before I take a couple of questions. The big thing, as I say, is that for both members, but also us, scale and the amount of traffic that people are moving now is growing all the time. And so we needed a way that everything could be automated, nicely programmed, and everything can be nicely and automatically programmed, or effectively programmed. The switches communicate at a MAC address, so they're synchronized, and so they're a lot more predictable. It gives a lot more stability to come in. And the flexibility I've already talked about, in terms of the flexibility, in terms of the control of the switch or the end ports coming through, the flexibility in terms of us with our vendor and our vendor choices, means it's the right way. EVPN is the technology, but also the disaggregated solution is the right way for us to go forward. So it took just 2.5 years. It was a long process, a lot longer than we took to migrate the bigger, at the time, London One LAN, but that's because we were moving to an unknown territory for us, so we wanted to be really sure. So we went through several stages. For several nicely phased stages, we went through a demonstrative phase. So the vendors had to come up, they had to show us that it was going to work, that we were going to achieve the goals that we wanted to do. And then throughout the rest of 2016, early 2017, we did a lot of prototyping. Our engineers spent a huge amount of time at POCs over in Taiwan, over in the Bay Area, making sure that we've got this right mix, because we're mixing these two vendors together that was going to work and meet our requirements. And then we gradually began to get down to what we needed to deliver. We started to get through some of the final lists of bugs, ready to go out. But we're testing all the time on this, because it's a big migration to do. And we were ready at the beginning of this year. So early 2018, we started to deploy the kit out into the locations. So 16 data centers in London, and those locations often had more than one switch, particularly where there was a high density of members and high density of traffic there. So as the deployment went forward, we then followed through with the migration. And the migration, we eventually moved all the members over and kept the previous equipment, previous LAN running at the same time for around 4 weeks. And then in June, it was fully operational. So we turned everything else off, tore everything else out, and we were finally done. So from that first decision to look at it in November 2015 through to when we actually made a vendor choice in the middle of 2016 was a two-year process. But we think we were right to take our time on that. And we still are happy that we did the big port discount in early 2016 to reflect that, because ultimately the cost didn't really change. We were able to manage the growth of the London 2 before the migration happened enough for that not to be a significant pain point. So now we're moving through into an enhancement phase. So we're looking to add new feature sets, we're looking to add new feature releases, software releases, and to move forward to be much more fully automated. So that's still a work in progress. We've only had a DevOps team in Links for around 5 years, so we're starting to get up to a good pace now. But there's always something new that comes along, and there's always something new, feature requests from members that we want to see, that we want to try and integrate into what we're doing. So for the marketplace, what does it mean? We've really achieved what we set out to achieve. This is another marketing slide, and it's really in there because what we're trying to say is we appreciate that we have a responsibility, a role as one of the leading IXs in the world, one of the biggest IXs in the world, to lead, to do leading edge technology stuff, to go out and try these new things, because then hopefully the rest of the IX world, if they feel that it's appropriate for them, can learn from that and take advantage of that, because we're all feeling the same pressures. You know, all the networks are trying to drive down prices. We all need to find ways to run our networks more efficiently, better quality, and cheaper. So being a top 3 network, and there's loads of ways you can measure that, by the way. We're probably number 1 in terms of the biggest membership organization. We're probably number 3 in terms of traffic. But that's a marketing slide, so I'll move on from it. But everybody, all of our members have benefited. So the smaller networks, those issues that we're having with background traffic, getting their ports flooded, that can go away, and that can be managed, and so they'll have a lot more value out of their peering rather than having to disconnect things and reconnect sessions up just because there's been a big batch of traffic come in that they don't really need or they need to be able to drop. The larger networks, they're going to have the benefit from the scale that we can bring in for them and deliver that scale, but they're also going to see the real cost benefits. So the way that we work at Links in terms of pricing, we have a membership fee, an annual membership fee, that includes a gig port at every single peering LAN. So we have an awful lot of members who just pay the membership fee. So there's no change or reduction in port fees for them. But as you work out through into the 10 and 100 gig ports, they're paying a monthly recurring charge for that. And so the more we can drive that price down for them, the happier they are and the more effective the cost of their peering is. And the final point, coming back to what I said very early on, is that everything here was designed with automation in mind, because it's just not practical to be able to scale the sort of way that we expect traffic to scale over the next 5 to 10 years without having automation and be able to do that. The number of physical heads we'd have to employ against a decreasing cost of sale, but an increasing cost of running the network just wouldn't work without it. So if you were expecting a technical presentation, I apologize. Hopefully it's not been too taxing towards the end of the day for you, and I've got a minute or two to take questions if there are any.
Yeah, some questions for Ben.
Any questions for Ben?
One of the advantages of using disaggregation is to be able to choose different vendors in different parts of your network. Let's say, for example, you will do an expansion on a part of the network, and instead of using edge core on that place, use another one. Are you confident? Do you trust to do this choice, and in this case, or another vendor of the software instead of IP Infusion?
We haven't got to that stage yet because these are new relationships that we're really happy with. But certainly that's part of the decision-making process that we went through, is how easy is it going to be able to switch in. I mean, we run effectively now equipment on 3 vendors. So London 1 is a Juniper LAN, the London 2 is this disaggregated solution, and in Manchester we run Extreme boxes, actually same in Scotland and Cardiff, and then in Northern Virginia we're on Juniper boxes as well. So the network engineers are quite confident and comfortable working with different boxes. We actually have, for a while we had some Juniper kit off the edge of the Manchester Exchange because we had a 100 gig member demand that we weren't able to deliver in there. So we're used to trying to blend in, but typically we try and keep it as easy as possible for the engineers, because the more they've got to learn, the harder it just makes their job.
Okay, I believe that just the possibility to change will keep the animals of the prices a little bit lower.
Yeah, that's the whole aim. Keep the prices low, but the service even better.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ben,
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.